Hi, everybody. Thank you for joining our How to Do Research and Get Published webinar series, today focused on interactions with publishing staff and what to expect. Before we get started, I'd like to introduce you to our team. Alan Carabas is a senior content manager on the journal's production team at Sage. He oversees journal-level production services, ensuring quality and timely delivery throughout the publication pipeline. Alan partners closely with authors, editors, and society partners to provide guidance on publication ethics, content management, and strategic workflow improvements, helping to develop and maintain best practice that support consistency and preserve academic integrity. Next, Isaac Hirsch is an associate publishing editor on the STM Journal's editorial team. He manages a list of society and proprietary journals, collaborating closely with editors, society partners, and other Sage departments. He also manages an extensive list of Marianne Liebert journals, facilitating the transition of the titles to Sage and developing them in their new publishing home. Alicia Macias is a senior content manager on the journal's production team at Sage. She oversees the full production process for her journals, from manuscript acceptance to final publication, with a strong focus on supporting authors, editors, and society partners. Alicia serves as the primary escalation point for complex issues, manages author and editor feedback, monitors vendor performance, and champions initiatives to improve publishing workflows. Next, Alex Morrison is a publishing editor on the STM Journal's editorial team, managing a range of scientific and medical journals. Alex has a background in content management, magazine publishing, and literary publishing. Next, Stephen Reynolds is an associate editor on the peer review management team at Sage. Before joining Sage, he was a criminal barrister specializing in criminal defense, and before that, he taught philosophy at the University of Oxford, where he was awarded his doctorate. And last, my name is Sean Scarsbrick, a marketing manager on the community engagement marketing team at Sage, and my primary role is to provide support to authors and reviewers as they move through the publishing process, with a particular focus on highlighting resources that provide support at the appropriate time throughout. Today, as we talk, please send us your questions. You'll see the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen. Please send any and all questions you've got to us. If you see a question there that you like that you'd like us to address, please upvote them, and we'll use that to filter through at the end. For any questions we don't address live, we will have in a follow-up blog post. And now, just to situate us, in front of you, you'll see the typical journey of a publication, from the very beginning of securing funding and conducting research, all the way through publication, article promotion, and potentially a resubmission or submitting another article. The webinar program that you're part of today has highlighted a number of these different touch points. So if you're interested in learning more, please do consult our library of recordings or join us for a future webinar where we cover a different topic. And now I'm very happy to pass it over to Alex.
Thank you, Sean. So the publishing process is extensive, and there are often many key individuals you will encounter throughout the process. Our goal here is to clarify the who is who and help you gain insight into the roles and responsibilities of the academic journal publishing staff. This will include the journal editors, the publishing editors, peer review personnel, and production contacts. Your main point of contact will be the editor-in-chief. Serving as an editor is a big responsibility. Most editors are mid to late career and have been actively involved with a journal previously in some capacity, especially within their discipline and field. They are responsible for tasks such as representing the journal and soliciting high quality manuscripts. They are continually working to increase citations and journal rankings, promoting journal content, and more. They ensure authors and peer reviewers follow best practices around keywords and abstracts and promoting their own work to help maximize the impact and discoverability of their articles. When appropriate, they focus on publishing multi-method research that discusses implications for future research or practice. They comply with accepted ethical and peer review standards, including those laid out in best practices as identified by the Committee of Publication Ethics. or COPE, or the Council of Science Editors, or as otherwise defined by SAGE, including securing at least two external and independent reviews from qualified individuals. Before inviting reviewers, they ensure that they have no conflict of interest with reviewing the work by conducting an independent external verification of the reviewer. As necessary, they acknowledge and investigate any allegations or express concerns of research impropriety about the integrity of the review process or editorial decision appeals. They are in charge of maintaining a healthy backlog of articles. They work to lower time to first decision and request additional revisions only when absolutely necessary. They strive to accept well-researched articles with valid methods and results. They refine, diversify, and expand the journal's editorial board, including appointing more international scholars. They ensure the journals avoid a bias relating to age, disability, gender identity, marriage and partnership status, pregnancy and parental responsibilities, race, religion and belief, sex, or sexual orientation. They respond to author queries, and finally, they manage production deadlines.
Alongside the editor-in-chief, you will often find the associate editors or the deputy editors. They also sometimes are called section editors as well. These are the editor-in-chief's core support team, and they contribute to the journal in all sorts of ways, including assessing papers for quality upon initial submission, ensuring that those submitted papers comply with the journal's standards and the submission guidelines. They often help with coordinating the peer review process as well. And depending on the journal, they will also often make recommendations to the editor-in-chief as to whether or not an article should be accepted or rejected. It is very rare for an associate editor or deputy editor to ever make a decision for a manuscript on whether it should be accepted or rejected. Those are very rare cases, as I mentioned, and would be for a situation such as if the editor-in-chief has to go on extended leave and is not able to facilitate the peer review process. So an associate editor can step in and help take that temporary role. They also support the editor in other activities, such as participating in conferences if the journal is associated with them, or helping out with editorial board meetings, or providing any input for the journal's editorial policy. As an author, it's less likely for you to communicate directly with the associate editors, as most of your correspondence should be with the editor-in-chief or a managing editor of similar capacity. But in the chance that you do, it is important just to be aware of who the associate editor is, how they function within the wider editorial team, and when you may encounter them. Next slide, please. Oh, thank you. The publishing editor. So the publishing editor is the principal and strategic contact that oversees the entire publishing process. I am a publishing editor. Alex Morrison, who you just heard from, he is a publishing editor. We are responsible for quite a lot with the journals, and that includes the overall management, the editorial health, the profitability of the journal, and just the overall smooth operation from the beginning to the end. So publishing editors, we naturally have a very close relationship with all the involved departments in the publishing process. That includes, of course, the editorial team with the editor-in-chief, the managing editors, associate editors, so on and so forth. The peer review team, the production team. We also work with the sales and marketing teams, but also very important, we do, if there's any external publishing partners, such as a society or an association, we liaise with those and make sure that all of their questions and everything like that are handled appropriately. So it's not as common for authors or reviewers to know the publishing editor of any given journal, because typically, as mentioned, your first point of contact will often be the editor-in-chief. But if you do send in a query or a question to the editor-in-chief or managing editor and they don't know how to respond to it or how to answer it, they often loop in the publishing editor who offers a wealth of information to be able to find a solution to whatever issue you might be having. So it's important to know who the publishing editor is in the overall process when those particular situations or issues arise.
Thanks, Sean. I'm going to just talk everyone through the peer review process. Now, that is, of course, the process by which your submissions are reviewed, revised, and ultimately, hopefully, accepted for publication. Once you submit your manuscript, it's going to go through an initial evaluation. That's going to look at whether it conforms to the journal's requirements. There may be formatting issues, referencing, abstract issues, and so on. Some editors will also perform a kind of desk review on an initial submission. They'll have a look and see whether it's actually in scope. And if it's not in scope, then it won't be taken forward. But in some cases, there's a method here at Sage where it'll be recommended or sent off to Sage Path, which is something we offer to help authors find a more suitable home for their research. So we've got the initial evaluation stage, and if all goes well, if your manuscript is seen as in scope, if it passes the various checks that we have, as I say, which are largely formatting, stylistic checks at that stage, it will progress to peer review. So at that stage, it's going to be assigned, in some cases, it will be assigned to an associate editor who will then take responsibility for it and send it out to reviewers. The reviewers will have a thorough look at the manuscript and they'll either recommend minor revisions, perhaps major revisions. In some cases, of course, they'll decide not to go forward with it at all. I should stress it's very rare that anything will be accepted at the first time of asking. The chances are it will come back to you for further revision. And if revisions are required, the revised manuscript will then be sent out again to have those revisions reviewed, to see on the progress that's been made on the manuscript, with the reviewers effectively providing the editor with the basis for their decision down the line. Finally, when the editor receives the submission, the revised submission, they will, if we have associate editors, they will tend to make a recommendation for the editor. As Isaac said, the associate editors won't typically make the decision, but they'll make a recommendation based on the reviews that have been received, and it will then fall to the editor-in-chief to make a final decision. Next slide, Sean. Now, both Alex and Isaac have spoken about the people you'll be in contact, in particular the editors, the editor-in-chief, the associate editor. Often it will be, your first point of contact will in fact be peer review associates or peer review managers here at Sage. There will be some journals where the editors handle everything themselves, but for journals which receive a higher volume of submissions, perhaps more complex submission processes, they will have a team behind them of peer review associates and managers. I'm one of those who will effectively manage this process. They'll manage the submission, the initial evaluation, and the sending of the manuscript through these various steps. So you'll have your peer review team that you'll ordinarily reach out to first. They are the people who will be behind the journal's own email inbox and queries if you have any queries about the submission, for example. If it's been sent back to you for formatting issues or unsubmitted, as we like to call it, then they'll be the people that you are in touch with who help to clarify whatever those issues are. You may also be in touch through those people with the editors, primarily the editor-in-chief or editorial board. If, for example, you have issues on editorial policy, or, for example, if you're reaching out to see whether your manuscript will fall in scope, you may reach out to them and receive a response from them. And finally, of course, there's technical support if you're having difficulty logging in or uploading your manuscript. You will reach out to the journal. As I say, it'll be the peer review managers behind that email who will then escalate your query to our tech support team. Okay.
I wanted to take a moment here just to highlight Sage's licensing and open access portion of the submission process. This process is specific to Sage. It might vary between publishers, but I did want to just take some time here because once a manuscript is accepted after peer review and before it enters production, at Sage, it goes through our Sage Journals licensing and payment platform. There we have various teams that will help you sign your author contributor licenses. We also have an open access team that will help assist you with processing that option if you've indicated that you've wanted it previously. So just wanted to take some time here. There isn't a particular editor or editor contact for this portion of the submission process, but as I mentioned, we have various teams that can help support you and get your manuscript from peer review to production. And for example, the open access email here is one that regularly helps out with this portion. So with that, I'll pass it over to production.
Thank you. So production is the stage where your manuscripts that you've been working on are really going to start taking their final shape. And what's really essential here is that your manuscript is properly prepared so that the final published work meets what the standards and requirements are for whichever journal you'll be publishing in.
And this includes adherence to specific style guidelines, inclusion of all necessary components, and proper formatting. We highly recommend reviewing the submission guidelines for the journal you are submitting to ensure your submission is prepared correctly to avoid any delays at submission and, if accepted, at production. Having the manuscript ready with developmental editing as well completed helps streamline the production process, allowing us to focus on the technical side of production, such as formatting and typesetting, and we'll go into a bit more of that in the next slide. In this slide, we'll cover article production from export to online first publication, or publishing ahead of print. After acceptance, the article is exported from the manuscript submission system to production. Here, we recommend reviewing during this process, we recommend reviewing your manuscript files to ensure the final and complete version of your article is provided to production. Occasionally, we receive an earlier version of the article, and this is typically caught when authors are reviewing the manuscript, the proofs, I should say, and that can cause a major delay since we have to restart production with those new files. But we call the first step in production article received, and here we ensure that all article content is included with your submission, and we verify that all the metadata matches with the submission system and the accepted manuscript files. We then move the article to a breakdown process where our typesetters prepare the manuscript for production. We tag all the elements in your article. This is a table, this is a heading, this is a paragraph or a bullet point list. We clarify all those things so we can get it prepared for typesetting. We then, after the breakdown, we then move the article to copy editing, where this entails a variety of technical tasks, structuring and cleaning the copy so that its elements are formatted to journal style and suitable for production. More on this shortly. And for typesetting, we take the copy edited file and generate a PDF. And this is the version that you will be reviewing when you get your proofs for review.
Yeah, and we'll touch on the proofs in a little more detail on the next slide, but just briefly. So in addition to the article PDF, we generate our article proofs using our cloud-based proofing tool. So for most of your journal proofs, you would be receiving a link to go into that cloud-based tool, Sage Edit, and review your staged proofs, and the editing for that is a lot simpler than trying to mark up a PDF. So once you've submitted corrections, we review all of the corrections. We make sure that they meet style guidelines, grammatical rules. We ensure that everything has been applied correctly. So after that proof corrections review is the online files review. So Sage creates the online files, and then we conduct a quality check to ensure that there is accuracy and consistency before we publish online first. Once everything looks good, we move that article live. It is published online first. The permanent DOI is assigned. It is considered the version of record, and it will remain in that online first queue until it's selected for inclusion in one of the journal issues. And next slide, please. And so doing kind of a deeper dive into copy editing, looking at what is checked. So once we send it to copy editing, there are some things that are checked automatically. It's a lighter copy edit. We're looking for things that a reader would typically notice, mistakes in grammar, spelling, punctuation, editorial style. We're looking to preserve author voice and intention as much as possible. So you can see on the slide, these are some of the common things that we are checking for, making sure that all of the elements are present, tables and figures are all called out, the values that appear in the text match the values that are in the tables, making sure that reference styling is validated, querying the author wherever necessary. So if there is anything missing, an author query is included so that when you do review the proof, you're able to address those queries and make sure that the manuscript that is published has all of the elements that it needs.
And I'll cover a bit on what is not checked during the copy editing stage, and that includes fact checking, accuracy of data or math, accuracy of references, content editing, rewriting, extensive language editing for non-native English language speakers. This is all kind of fits under the developmental editing that I mentioned earlier. And that's the kind of editing that is reviewed, assessed during the peer review process. So you want to make sure that that kind of editing is taken care of before your article reaches production, because that kind of review is really requires your expertise and the editor's expertise for the journal you're submitting to. Next slide. Here we'll talk a bit more about the author proofs and publication and final publication. Article proofs are generated using Sage's cloud-based tool called Sage Edit. Editing in Sage Edit is very similar to using track changes in Word or Microsoft Word, and it includes built-in navigation tools to review your edits, to resolve all the author queries raised during copy editing. And the tool is accessible with most browsers, Chrome, Edge, Firefox, Safari. It's not limited by software, and it can be accessible on mobile or on a desktop. And during the on once we receive your corrections, we review them all to ensure they follow journal style and grammatical rules ahead of publication. Note that this is the final chance to make any changes before publication, and all post-publication corrections will be subject to review and may require publication of a correction notice depending on the request.
So after all of that proofing is done and we have published the article online first after our quality check, what online first publishing really does for authors is it helps to get earlier exposure, readership, and citation opportunities ahead of final publication in a journal issue. And as I mentioned before, it is considered the version of record, and the DOI that's assigned is permanent. What the final publication issue will do will assign the volume, issue, and pagination number for when that your article is being cited. When the article publishes online first, corresponding authors are automatically notified. They'll receive an email that the article is published, and it will have a link to free copies to download the final PDF. And that's something that they're able to then share with co-authors. And then you'll receive another automatic notification when it publishes in an issue. Next slide, please. So your production contacts, I'll be going through production editor. So as your manuscript is making its way through production, your main contact is going to be the production editor. So they're handling kind of the day-to-day article production. They're making sure that the article stays on track, that it is not getting delayed at any of the stages that we mentioned. They're making sure that the quality checks are performed, that journal-specific guidelines are being met, and then they are regularly communicating with content managers such as Alan and myself with different needs that may come up. And then Alan will talk more about the role of a content manager.
Thank you, Alicia. Yeah, so the content managers manage issue production and coordination with the production editor. and serve as the primary contact for the journal editor and editorial office. We oversee journal level production services, including journal progress and vendor performance, ensuring quality and timely delivery throughout the publication pipeline. We also assist with overall production strategy and help lead broader initiatives beyond article and issue creation, including post-publication corrections, content management, and ad hoc requests. We are also the primary escalation point for complex issues and feedback from authors and editors, and cases that may come up with regard to like post-publication requests, like ethical concerns or even withdrawals. We assist with those.
Great.
Pass back to you, Sean.
Thank you very much. So we'll move into the Q&A shortly, but before we do so, I wanted to just flag a few things from our end. Today's webinar is just one in a larger series of webinars. In 2 weeks, we're running a webinar called Amplifying Voices, Strategies for Early Career Black Scholars. So this will be a really nice way to learn a little bit and hear from experts in a nice panel discussion about the topic. In March, in a month from today, we'll be discussing how to deal with rejection. This is a very common thing in the academic sphere. Articles are rejected, grants are rejected, tenures rejected. So this will be a nice space to learn a little bit more about what that means and how to cope with it and what to do. In November, we have a webinar specifically on neurodiversity. So lots going on here, and definitely keen to see everyone join back for another webinar. At Sage, we have an information for authors hub. This will have a lot of information that was discussed today, dedicated for authors to help them learn more about getting published and what to do after your article is published. And I will leave this on the screen. If you're interested in signing up for our author newsletter, in this we highlight new resources that will help you with your publication, and you'll get direct links to register for upcoming webinars. So lots of good stuff here. Now, please do continue to send us your questions. We're getting to as many as we can today. But I think a nice one to start with, and I see this as a recurring theme for folks. A lot of people are asking for practical strategies for early career researchers to improve their chances of publication. And we see that this is a problem, and it is, as we said, common for folks to be rejected. But I think it would be very helpful for our team here to talk a little bit about this from your perspective. So what tips would you have for our viewers today to help them get a manuscript accepted and move through the peer review and production process with ease, especially for folks who haven't published before?
I can start this one off. I think first and foremost, it's so important to review the aims and scope of the journal that you want to submit to. Ensuring that your article is within those aims and scope will, really help you get past that initial review, get past that desk rejection phase, and actually allow your article to be reviewed. So make sure that you're finding the right journal. Sage has a journal finder tool that you can utilize that might help you position your article and find the right journal. And just review the scope. If you're still unsure, I believe it was said earlier, you can reach out to the journal's editor-in-chief or editorial team and ask if they think that your article is within the scope of the journal. And after that, also make sure that you're reviewing thoroughly the manuscript submission guidelines. Make sure that your article is formatted correctly. You make sure that they accept your article type, whether it's original research, a review, an editorial. They might have different formatting requirements based on what kind of article you are submitting. So it's really so important just to thoroughly review all of the information on the journal. It may even be good to look at what the journal has been publishing recently. What topics are they covering? Are they similar to yours? Are you adding to the conversation? Are there any hot topics that they seem to be focusing on? Is there a call for papers? Often journals will do specific calls for papers on specific subjects. So that might be a really good opportunity to find a niche in a journal. So really getting to know the journal well before you submit could really put you at an advantage and at least help your article get to the peer review stage.
I would also encourage, just speaking from a production perspective, as Alex said, those manuscript submission guidelines. So many times once something has reached production, things that we run into that may hold up the speed at which we're able to get an article through production come from maybe a misunderstanding of something in the submission guidelines, something that was missed. So really making sure that everything that's listed in there for preparing your manuscript for submission and submitting it are there and are present. One of the big things that we see during production is requests for things like authorship changes, big changes, or perhaps even rewriting things that we're not able to make changes to authorship once the manuscript has been editorially accepted. And so if that is missed in the manuscript submission guidelines and then it gets flagged at some point during production, everything kind of goes on halt while we start having that back and forth. And so getting all of that squared away ahead of time helps the production process to move a lot smoother.
Thank you both. That's very helpful. I actually wonder, I see another question that's related to this. People have been asking, from a publishing staff perspective, what are the most common issues you see in submissions that authors might not realize are weakening their chances? We did talk a little bit about this. We need to make sure you're reading the manuscript submission guidelines, that you are providing everything up front, and that you're being clear and transparent. But is there anything else here of note? Steve, please.
Yeah, I would say I hate to be a stuck record, but returning to Alex's points earlier, I think one of the key things that you see is uh, submissions falling slightly outside the scope, or basically you have to really know the publication you're aiming for really, really well. You have to have a look at, has there just been a special collection on something maybe 6 months ago that you're writing about? Is there something in the pipeline? Those sorts of things, kind of get to know, have a look at the editors, have a look at specialisms, and really focus, really hone your submission so that it fits, like a jigsaw piece right into that journal's kind of submission framework. And it's I would say, again, being a bit of a stuck record, but it's things falling slightly outside that that tend to be, can be end up being out of scope and not accepted, even if it's in other ways, eminent research.
That's great. Thank you. Yeah, I see a number of questions coming through about this. Papers are frequently desk rejected because they do not fit the scope of the journal. So be very clear about that. Make sure you're reading that. Make sure your article is the right fit. Um,
Just to add on that point, Sean, as well, I mean, the journal's submission guidelines and web pages will all have aims and scope. So there'll be in most cases, a really clear outline of what it is they're looking for. And almost like, an application to a job or something like that, you kind of shape it to those criteria. So pay attention to that kind of thing.
Thank you. Let's see. We've got another one. A number of people asking about the time for publication. So, I mean, to put it bluntly, why does the publication process take so long? Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I can get this started. Um, so it varies, of course, between all the journals and everything, but there are just so many steps to consider. So from initial submission of the manuscript, there is, of course, the initial review, and then we start gathering reviewers, and the review portion of the submission phase can take a while. It is often difficult to get reviewers to volunteer their time and effort for manuscripts. So oftentimes it can be 5 or 6 reviewers before we even start to get reviewers accepting manuscripts. So just there's a lot of potential bottlenecks in the process. It also depends on the volume of submissions that a journal is receiving. If it's just an editor-in-chief and he's doing all the work himself, then that can also create a lot of delays. But if he does have a larger team of associate editors and a wide spread editorial board with multiple subject expertise, then they can typically process manuscripts a little bit faster. But just with all these variations, it can potentially create more bottlenecks for the submission process. And then, of course, once after peer review, we go into needing to sign contributor licenses. We figured out a way to reduce that time as much as possible with our Sage Journals licensing and payment platform, which makes it a little bit more easier for authors to sign their contributor licenses. That used to be a bottleneck where it would take even like a month or two for authors to get all their contributor licenses, but because of the accessibility of that platform, that has made it a lot easier. And then, of course, production has all kinds of variabilities as well, from the proof, from typesetting, from just all these different checks. And then ultimately, from when a manuscript does get finally published, when it gets assigned to an issue, that is also up to the discretion of the editor-in-chief of when they want to assign particular manuscripts to a specific issue. So just a quick overview of all those things. There's just so many checks. There's so many steps. We have some journals that are extremely efficient with a lot of team members working on it to be able to get all these steps on. But there's also journals that they don't have as many people working on it. So yeah, your mileage may vary ultimately.
Thank you, Isaac. Um, yeah, I think that's a really important thing to take away from this conversation. I understand it could feel frustrating from an author perspective if you're waiting, but also the checks are worthwhile. It really adds to the scholarly record, and it's really important for your research that it is credible and done correctly.
Sorry, Sean, just to add on real quick, and that's a huge point of this webinar specifically, is that so now you have some idea of who are the people behind the scenes working on all these different checks to make sure that these manuscripts get through the process from the publishing editor to the peer review manager to the production team, so on and so forth. So now you know who some of the figures are that can help get your manuscript published as fast as possible.
Yep, great point. Your manuscript is in many good hands, so it's a good thing. Um, okay, I see an interesting question here. If a researcher submits a regular research article and then about a week later notices a newly announced special issue in the same journal that aligns very closely with the manuscript's theme, what would you recommend?
I would say in that case, if you've submitted your article already to X journal is now saying we've got a call for papers for this special edition or special issue, I would contact the journal and say, this is my situation. Could this be considered for the special issue? You don't need to necessarily resubmit again, but it could be recategorized as a submission for that issue.
Manuscript submission guidelines should usually have a contact email for usually the editor-in-chief, sometimes a managing editor, someone from the editorial staff of each journal. So questions like this, sort of journal-specific questions, can be always directed towards those people. But you'll usually find that contact information in the manuscript submission guidelines.
Yes, great point. You'll be working a lot with Sage staff throughout your publishing process, but also the journal editorial office is really going to be a huge point of contact for any questions you have. A number of questions are coming through about the peer review process, particularly about responding to reviewer comments. So people have been asking, if you're seeing conflicting reviews or maybe a comment that you disagree with, how do you handle it, and what's the best way to move that forward to ensure your manuscript isn't automatically rejected because of that?
If you have, I would say, if you feel that you fundamentally don't agree with the reviewers, I would say that it's important. You've got to take on what they're saying. You can respond within the manuscript, but also you have an opportunity to provide a response. So in addition to the edits that you're being asked to make, you'll provide a point-by-point response to all of their points. And that's your opportunity really to argue your case, if you like, and respond. Let's say point three is something that you really kind of take issue with, and you can provide there the reasons, the evidence, the basis for the conclusions you've reached as opposed to theirs. So I would use that as the appropriate opportunity to come back.
Thank you. That's great. And it's very, very important that you're going point by point, answering everything and being very transparent about it through the process. Um, Another question that's actually related to this one. Do you receive any feedback after a manuscript is rejected?
Again, I can take this one, Sean. The answer is it depends on the stage at which your manuscript is rejected. Usually, if it's rejected, the desk reject stage, it's out of scope. You may not be given much more information than that. But if it's gone through the process of being reviewed and their conclusion has been to reject it, then you'll normally be provided with their reasons for that. In the same way that you would if it had been a recommendation for review, you'd be given the issues that you need to address. So you'll normally be given something at that stage. But as I say, at the earlier stage, it will be effectively, it will be an explanation on the desk reject basis or out of scope.
Thank you very much. That's super helpful. I'm reading through the questions right now. I'm trying to pick out the next one, but in the meantime, I did want to say to everyone joining us live, I've seen the questions coming through about this one. You will receive a follow-up email from us. You'll receive a certificate of attendance. You'll receive a link to the recording, so you're able to continue to engage with this. And we'll send over links that are relevant to today's conversation. Um, just scanning through, I see a number of questions about guidance for becoming a reviewer. Do you have any thoughts on how does somebody become a reviewer? Or what are the qualifications to become a reviewer?
Isaac, do you want to go?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I was just gonna say, yeah, the journals are always needing reviewers. If you have a particular expertise in a field and you know of what journals are available or are within those fields, I would definitely recommend reaching out to the editors or the managing editors or anyone associated with the journal to basically just offer your information, offer your case. If you can provide your CV, just to let them know that you have expertise in that particular field. Editors are more than likely to want to accept you in their pool of reviewers. So I would highly recommend reaching out to any journals that you are interested in potentially reviewing. And that Sage also does have a number of benefits if you do review for a journal. That includes free access to all of Sage's journals that are published online, among other benefits. So we definitely recommend it. We encourage it, and definitely check in with a particular editor.
That's great. Yeah, and of course, reviewing for a journal is sometimes very helpful for you to learn about the style guides for that specific journal and also improve your chances of being published as an author too. Um, if I can, I see a number of questions here that I have quick responses to that I'll take, and then I've got one for the team. Somebody's asked, how many times does it take to publish an article in Sage Open or essentially any journal? There's no real answer to that. It kind of depends. You could be published on the first time, or it could take you 10 times, but just note that rejection is common. Unfortunately, that's part of the process. Somebody's asked about possibilities for people in developing nations. There's lots of ways for folks from lower or middle income countries to get published. You don't always need to publish with an associated APC, or you may receive discounts for it. So there's lots of possibilities there. We've done webinars on this topic, which I encourage you to look back to. Um, Okay, a question for the group here. Sometimes a journal does not indicate a clear timeline in the initial decision. If I revise the manuscript, how long should I wait before I submit it to another journal?
Yeah, this is a particular circumstance in which I would recommend again reaching out to the editor-in-chief directly and just seeing if you can get that that information. If there's no clear timeline, at Sage we try our best to be as transparent with metrics as possible, including the time to first decision. But if that information is not available, or if it has way past the estimated time frame, I would recommend reaching out to the editor. If they can't provide a good estimate, you can always request to withdraw your manuscript. So I would say if the journal does have the metric stipulated when that first decision is expected and it's way past it, and you reach the editor and they're not either not responding or they can't give a good estimate, then I would recommend potentially withdrawing it and submitting to a new journal.
Thank you, Isaac. Yeah, and that's again a critical point. If you're missing any communication or if you're missing out from somebody, the journal editorial office is really the best place to go. They will help you figure it out. Um, oh, go ahead, Steve.
John, just on that point, we've had Alex, you raised the fact that contact details, editors' contact details will be on the journal's site. Isaac's raised that too. I think there are lots of journals with lots of different timeframes, lots of different requirements, with varying degrees of or varying volumes of submissions. The first port of call, go onto the journal's website, check the metrics, check the scope. And there, if you don't have the information you need, in each case, you're going to have contact details. So yeah, just to reiterate that point, really, I would say go to the website, have a look. Normally, you'll be given a time frame, at least for different stages of the process, if not for the whole stage, because that's harder to provide. And if it doesn't have what you need, then reach out to the journal's email address or the editors, because in each case it may vary.
Yeah, and at Sage, the journal's contact information can be found on the submission guidelines. It's usually at the end of the document.
Great, thank you. That's a good flag to know where to look. I'm seeing a number of questions come through about how to sign up to be a reviewer. We have guidance for this on our website. What you'll need to do, for the most part, is create a journal-specific reviewer account on the journal submission website and go through the steps there. It's clear once you get there. A number of questions have been asking about article processing charges, or APCs, and these are fees that are associated with publication. And the questions are, does paying an APC increase the chance of getting published or increase the speed of peer review? Answer is no. That will not do that. Article processing charges should not impact and will not impact your chances of being published. If you are approached by somebody with this, with the intention for this to happen, it's likely predatory and it's not something that you should trust. I think I'm trying as best as I can to get through all the questions here. There's so many good ones. Question about plain language summaries. I'm wondering if anybody here could talk about plain language summaries, their impact, their benefits, and how they, how do they work maybe in the production process too, or the peer review process?
Well, in general, plain language summaries are is a summary of the article using more simplified, less specialized language. So a summary that might be better understood by the average person who is maybe not specialized in the subject matter that you're writing about. What's great about plain language summaries is it makes the article more accessible to the wider public. It might make it easier to promote, and via social media. That accessibility makes it easier to promote. So it might increase that readership of your article, might increase the reach of your article.
Very helpful. Thank you.
And just to add on to that, not every journal does plain language summaries, but you will be able to find out if they do offer that through the submission guidelines.
Thank you. We have an interesting question here about where to submit to. So somebody asked, should one submit to a journal with a high impact factor or a low impact factor, but with high prestige? What are your kind of thoughts, or what would you recommend to people here?
Say, again, not to be a broken record, but first and foremost, to be focusing on the scope of the journal. Impact factor, things like prestige, I think, are great and should be considered, but make sure that your article and within the scope of the journal, finding a journal that is covering the subject matter that you want to cover, I think should really be the first focus. I mentioned it earlier, but just to mention again, Sage's journal recommender tool, I think, is a great tool that will help you find a journal that is within your scope, that's covering the subject matter that you want to cover. And a lot of different ways to measure impact. Impact factors, of course, uh, one of them, probably the most popular, but there are also article level metrics. An article published in a low impact factor journal may still get a lot of downloads and a lot of citations on its own, regardless of what journal is published in. So there's a lot of things to consider. But I think, again, when thinking about a journal, first and foremost, it's important to just find a journal that fits the subject matter of your article.
Thank you, Alex. Yeah, and I think this is a really, really interesting topic too. I think you need to decide what is worth it for you. Like, are you willing to wait for an article, a journal with a higher impact factor? Do you think that your article maybe has the type of findings they're looking for, or do you think you'd have better reach with one with lower impact factor? There's no hard and fast rule. It really falls on you as the researcher to make that call, and what would be the best choice. All right. I think with that, I think we've come to an end. We've gotten through as many of the Q&A as I think is possible in today's call. Um, I want to thank all of our panelists, and I want to thank everybody who is joining us as an attendee today. Really appreciate you being part of today's webinar, and I hope to see you in a future webinar. Thank you very much, and take care.